Okay, hello, my friends. My name is Gerdes, and these are the three big stories for today. It is Wednesday, June 12th. So, the peace conference in Switzerland is coming up. Starts on the 15th. Again, it's the 12th today. The slimmed down agenda of the Swiss Peace Summit aims to secure consensus. So, they reduced all the aims down so that they could create a comprehensive statement that countries could agree on. 90 countries and organizations out of 160 that were invited have confirmed that they will attend the two-day Ukraine Peace Summit being hosted by Switzerland June 15th to 16th. Ukraine insisted that only countries that respect Ukraine's right to exist under international law should take part. Well, that kind of only makes sense. Several commentators who have seen the draft final statement have interpreted specific mention to only three of Zelensky's 10-point peace plan as an attempt to slim down the agenda to secure consensus. The idea here is that we want to make sure that we can come up with a statement that is going to be something that everyone can get behind. And so they were just looking at those 3 points. Now, there were 90 countries, but it's actually dropped down from 93 to 78 over the last few days. And that's pretty significant that it has dropped in that way. A number of countries have, I think, behind the scenes been maybe stiff armed into not attending. Okay, um, next story. Putin could struggle to end the war in Ukraine because it's making some poor Russians richer. Now, that's a really interesting way of approaching this and thinking about like the population may or may not be with Putin, but some of the population is more motivated to keep the war going because it's actually lining their pockets. Russia's war against Ukraine has made some poor Russians better off. Russia's sanctions hit economy has appeared resilient even more than 2 years into the war, posting 3.6% GDP growth last year. Well, so the growth is funny money because you're actually going in debt, but you're actually growing in certain sectors for certain reasons, and we'll talk about that. Reports from Russia suggest that growth is primarily driven by wartime activities that generate demand for military goods and services. Russia's economy is progressively being militarized. Some regions have been winners in Russia's new war-oriented economy. Some of Russia's poorest regions are benefiting from a redistribution of wealth. Households in regions where military recruitment is up have recorded higher deposits since the war started. Now, think about this. This is really interesting. So, some areas, there's higher mobilization. These are more poor, more rural areas as opposed to a more cosmopolitan Moscow kind of region. And so that's actually helped them significantly more if they don't die. The research showed bank deposits grew about 30% from August 2022 to August 2023 in poor regions where more men were joining the war. Soldiers from poor regions who are now on the front lines might struggle with a decline in income because there are few opportunities should they return home. So you're actually in a scenario where you're making more money being in the military. That's how poor you are. Then, like, that's your best option. Higher pay, of course, comes with risks. The Russian army offers contract soldiers with a nationwide sign-on bonus of 195,000 rubles, or about 2,200 US dollars, while salaries start at 210,000 rubles a month. So maybe 2,300 or something along those lines. In comparison, Bloomberg calculated that workers in Russia, so the relatively high paying oil and gas sector, took home only 125 200 rubles in monthly nominal salary in the first 2 months of the year. So a little bit more than half, and that was in a high paying profession in the oil and gas industry. The country is increasingly caught in a web of challenges because of the war and its impact on the economy. Just something to think about how odd things are. Okay, I saw this article and I thought, wow, we need to talk about that. The enemies list. I showed you that with Marjorie Taylor Greene the other day, talking about her. I'm on an enemies list. Okay, a kill list, I think is what she called it. Enemies list of Trumpists and communists published by Biden linked Ukraine group Lawmakers charge. Okay, so this is in Fox News, which is ironically part of that orbit that is discussed in the article. First on Fox, Ohio Republican Senator J.D. Vance and Florida Republican Matt Gaetz are demanding answers from Secretary of State Anthony Blinken surrounding a State Department-linked Ukrainian non-governmental organization that published a list of Americans labeled Trumpists and communists for their opposition to providing more U.S. funds to Ukraine. On June 6, 2024, a Ukrainian corporation, Tax-Deductible, published an online article entitled Roller Coaster from Trumpists to Communists, the forces in the U.S. impeding aid to Ukraine and how they do it. Well, J.D. Vance and Gates were not happy about that. Vance, who is considered a top contender as former President Trump's running mate, and if that happens, you know that Trump has given up completely on the conservative Reagan wing of the party if he nominates J.D. Vance, because he's all MAGA all the time. Vance, who's considered a top contender as a running mate in the 2024 election, and Gates sent a letter to Blinken on Wednesday demanding information, including any grant agreements the State Department has with this NGO. Gates was, by the way, the one that flipped the switch, called for the resignation of the former Speaker of the House, throwing everything into chaos. Okay, so that comes from this article here, which kind of it's trying to draw the connections between those that are pro-Russian in some kind of universe. And Donald Trump's obviously the biggest player. Tucker Carlson's a big player. J.D. Vance is a big player. Matt Gaetz. Marjorie Taylor Greene. So you understand how this works. I did an entire video about this earlier in the day. So by the way, how do you like this with a larger me on here? Does that matter? Does that not matter? Just curious. Okay. So here I want to switch. And so we know that Donald Trump is actually probably one of the greater threats to Ukraine. Here is Paul Ryan talking about Donald Trump and how he's not voting for Donald Trump. And now this is the former Speaker of the House. He was the Republican vice presidential candidate a few years ago. Let's hear what he has to say.
Is this really important issue? If you put yourself above the Constitution, as he has done.
But what happened?
I think that makes you unfit for office.
Was the whole January 6th thing?
That's a part of it. I think it's a contribution of factors, but I think it really is just character at the end of the day. And the fact that if you're willing to put yourself above the Constitution, an oath you swear when you take office, in federal office, whether it's president or a member of Congress, you swear an oath to the Constitution. And if you're willing to suborn it to yourself, I think that makes you unfit for office.
Does it?
And I do think character is a really important issue.
Okay, so that's Paul Ryan, and he said he wasn't voting for Trump, and he's not voting for Biden. That's where I am. I'm in the same place. Here's Adam Kinzinger. He is also a Republican. He's a much more moderate Republican than Ryan was, but nonetheless, what he's saying is spot on.
Future of the Republican Party, I mean, that is the direction it seems to be moving in more and more.
Look, it depends how far in the future. I think in a year, yeah, it's still that party. I think if you fast forward 10 years, I believe there's not going to be a person on this planet alive that will ever admit they supported Donald Trump. Because I think, look, if he loses, obviously he's a loser once again. And that has a way of basically waking people up in a movement or in a political party. Even if he wins, he's president for 4 years. Very few presidents come out of that more popular than they went in. America will be exhausted of him. And I think the Republican Party will start to eat him up by the end of that. That's my optimistic view. But then somebody else could come along and run that same, formula. And so who knows? But this is why people like Paul Ryan speaking out, talking about being a conservative, but now being called a rhino, not because of what he believes, but because he's not pledging allegiance to a man. Instead, he pledges allegiance to a constitution.
Okay, if you don't know what a rhino means Republican in name only, R-I-N-O. And look, Ryan is not a rhino. He really is a solid conservative, but he will not pledge allegiance to Trump. Then there are others like this this representative talking about Paul Ryan as a piece of garbage.
Paul Ryan, you're a piece of garbage. You're a piece of garbage, and we should kick you out of the party. For Paul Ryan to say he's not voting for Donald Trump, that's the problem with some of our Republicans. It's guys like that. Don't go spouting your mouth off and saying you're a conservative. You're spitting in the face of the leader of our party, Donald Trump. I mean, grow up a little bit.
Okay, but Ryan actually is a conservative. Trump is not the conservative. Trump is a populist, and it's something different than what we conservatives are actually like. Okay, last little bit here. I posted this about a week ago. Is it too soon to use the phrase post-Trump Republican Party? Uh, just asking for a friend. I mean, I think that's where we're going to be, and what that's going to look like, I'm not sure. Now, I talk about Trump because it's a real possibility that if Trump is reelected, he can do some damage to Ukraine. By the way, I'm not sure that this is right, but there's something right about this. There's a center, there's the right, there's the left. When we talk about MAGA as far right, we think of like left to right, but far right kind of bends in. It's actually less conservative than the right. Far left is less liberal than the far left. And so there's something very right about that horseshoe. Now, I showed you this little bit about the this graph here with Trump and Fox News and Tucker and the gray zone and all these other entities. And I was thinking about propaganda, and then I saw this. This is what it looks like when we watch Russian propaganda. Hey, where did it go? All right, my friends, thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.